Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And we're going to, of course, continuing on Daniel chapter 11, writing out the line of Rome. But before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we have to study here this morning. And so we invite your Spirit to instruct us. We know, Lord, that there's many things we don't understand, and we need your enlightenment. We also pray for one another and for the trials that we face, that you can give us strength. And we ask, Lord, that the truths that you show to us can help us in our daily lives and help all who are searching for truth to have confidence and faith in you. Be with us now, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I was just having a bit of trouble with one of my computers there, so I had to restart it. And I have to bring up this other file as well. So when we had, I'm just going to go back here a little bit of review, I guess I might call it, just over the last little bit. And I have to open this up. If that works, there we go. Okay, I'll come back to that. So we had, I'm just going to go back here a little bit. Now, when we had finished off Greece, we had taken the 6 Syrian wars and we had lined them up with our history. We had the third angel arriving April 5th, 2030. And that was some very interesting structures. And we're going to find that this line of Rome is going to be similar, but there are differences. And that's where each of these lines repeats and it covers the same history, but of course, Greece is addressing Greece, right? That is, it's addressing the dragon power, where Rome is addressing the papal power, and also does represent to some degree the United States as well. So when we started drawing out this line, it starts out very much the same. We have the Soviet-Afghan War, just as we did with Greece, and yet there are details in here because it's the beginning of this line, right? That is, we're comparing here the Soviet-Afghan War with the Fifth Syrian War. So that is, our line isn't much different, but the line of Rome is a different history illustrating our line. And so we talked a little bit about what does the period of darkness refer to? How do we address that in this line? So I'm going to bring up the charts here, the diagrams. Okay, let's share this. So what we see here is what we had drawn out yesterday and the day before. We have the Fifth Syrian War. That's going to parallel the Soviet-Afghan War. That's the period of darkness. And here we have Rome exalting itself to establish the vision. We have the verses underneath. So we can see that Panium is represented in 11 verse 15. And then we have the Battle of Thermopylae. That's the center of the 62 weeks, where Rome, in a sense, we call this the formalization. So Rome has exalted itself. And in this history, shortly after the Battle of Panium, about 10 years or whatever, we're going to have this Battle of Thermopylae where Rome defeats Greece in this battle. And then the next verse is going to address the siege of Jerusalem by Pompey. in 63 BC. And then we could see that the second angel's message is going to be represented by what's in Daniel chapter 11. That is, it's going to be Julius Caesar, it's going to be Augustus and Tiberius, and then ultimately it's going to be Titus. So it's not going to address all of those emperors in between, and Titus, and technically is not the emperor yet. It's the other guy. Starts with a V. So, but he's just the general at that time. But he is going to end up being an emperor after that. So this is the history that Daniel chapter 11 shows us. And what we talked about yesterday, whether I expressed myself very well or not, that it is that there was, there was, for me, an understanding then about Daniel chapter 11, the purposes of it. That is, when we looked at these lines in the past, at least when I did, you're just trying to match up the verses with history. But the question is, why are some historical events chosen over others? And the reason has to do with the lines themselves. That is, what God is revealing or unveiling. Now we know that Daniel chapter 11 is really an expansion of Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 7, right? All of these kingdoms. But of course, it's going to start with Daniel chapter 11 starts with the fall of Babylon and the beginning of Persia. So we know that it's going to mark that history that parallels 1798 and 1989, right? So this is what we understand about Daniel chapter 11. And the purposes of these lines, the purposes of the events in each of these lines. So with Rome, because Rome has exalted itself to establish the vision, it's exalted itself, but itself is not doing that to establish the vision. That's in God's providence, because Rome needs to be there for the crucifixion of Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, right? So that's what this line is going to address. The problem is going to be when we start looking at this line in our history, specifically, what would that be? And we've looked at some of it, but we hadn't completed Rome. That is, we hadn't given the present truth application for many of these verses. And that's what we're going to have to do. And there is another line in there as well for Rome. So Rome's going to have more than one line. So that's going to be interesting once we get this sorted out. So with the verses that we looked at that got Augustus, Tiberius, and Titus, let's look at these verses again. So just kind of review what we had done yesterday. So when we get to verse 17 and 18, that's going to cover Julius Caesar, and that's going to be pretty clear, right? So when you get 16 is going to cover the formalization of the first message and the empowerment of the message. When you get to 17, that's going to address Julius Caesar. So he, pagan Rome under Julius Caesar. You got to see what I'm doing here, so I'm going to share that screen. So Julius Caesar sets his face to enter Egypt, right, with the strength of his whole kingdom and the upright ones with him. And we say that the upright ones represent the Jews. And those are the Jewish forces loyal to Caesar, led by Antipater. And those are going to, in our history, represent the Protestants in spiritual formation. So we can see how that's going to address 9/11. Thus shall he do, talking about what God is going to do in his providence. And God is then going to give to Caesar the daughter of women. And since this is Cleopatra in that history, we say that this is the world, the UN, the dragon power, whatever we want to call it. And this is going to happen in this history that's being described. So we're going to see that that's going to be at 9/11, or we could say it's at 11/9, depends how we look at it. But she shall not stand neither for him. After this shall he turn his, he's going to turn his face toward the isles, unto the isles, right? So he's going to turn his face. This is going to refer to the UN, right? And he shall take many, but a prince, that is Michael, your prince, shall cause the reproach to cease. Right? And so we're saying that this is symbolizing July 18, 2020. And this introduces the cross, the third angel's message. And without his own reproach, Christ has no shame of his own. He shall cause it to turn upon himself, a reference to the cross. So Christ takes our shame on himself. So this is contrasting Julius Caesar with Christ. Julius Caesar's ambition compared to Christ's condescension. And then Julius Caesar is going to turn his face toward the fort of his own land. Now we have this as Bush II, and his own land is Rome. This is USA, the armies of Rome. But he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So referring to Caesar's assassination. And then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes. So we put that as Obama. And in the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle, right? And in his Augustus's or Obama's estate shall stand up a vile person. So of course that's going to be Trump. To whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably. There's a peaceful transference of power after Augustus's death. So, and then obtain the kingdom by flatteries, right? So we got Tiberius, Caesar, paralleling Trump, and Trump is just like Tiberius, this false flattery. And then the arms of a flood shall they, the alleged seditionist is what Swearingen has, be overflown from before him. So some of this stuff we have to kind of figure out what this means and how we're going to understand this. But we know this is going to refer to the Prince of the Covenant, the crucifixion of Christ. And we put that as July 18th. So this is mentioned before in this contrast. And then we're going to have this stated as it happens under Tiberius. So it's going to be mentioned earlier in this contrast between Julius Caesar and Christ. And then you're going to have Julius Caesar followed by Obama, and then Obama followed by Trump. So there's still a lot of detail that we have to work out in here. And then the other part was we're going to have this league. And so it's going to go back in history to this league, but that's because it's pointing forward to the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, it's also going to address Rome. It's basically when the capital from Rome moves to Constantinople. And it's also going to address the Edict of Milan, so the 313. So 313 and 330 BC are going to be mentioned here. So we're going to have to be able to take what we had done with these verses and put it into this structure. So in some ways, this is a line in and of itself, right? So we're dealing with Rome, but we have these lines. So this is a zoom into, so somehow we have to take this and place it in our history. And there are different ways that we could do it. So, any questions about this so far?
No questions quite yet, no.
Okay, so going back to our diagrams. We can take these verses and we could, put them underneath here, which we're going to have to do. But really the difficulty is understanding these events. Now, one way that we could look at it, so normally what we have the destruction of Jerusalem as the third angel's message arriving, right? And that would be a close of probation. We have the stoning of Stephen in there, but it's not specifically mentioned in this verse. So we don't have specifically the end of the 70 weeks mentioned. We're going to have the crucifixion of Christ under Tiberius. And so we're going to have to try to figure out how we place that specifically. But because this is about Rome, what Rome is doing, it's going to come and conquer Jerusalem. It's going to, first defeats Greece, then it's going to conquer Jerusalem. And then we're going to have these emperors, and Julius Caesar's not an emperor, but Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Tiberius being marked. Julius Caesar as a contrast to Christ, but Christ comes in the time of Augustus, crucified in Tiberius. So that's the midst of the week in Daniel chapter 9, where the Messiah is cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So Titus is going to destroy the city of Jerusalem and the sanctuary itself. So, maybe we could say, we know the stoning of Stephen is a close of probation, but really so is the destruction of Jerusalem. They're connected, right? There's the sentence pronounced, and then there's its execution. So this all, to me, this makes sense. What we see here in Daniel chapter 11, we can clearly see that this is the history that it's describing. It's not describing a history dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes. And then we have to understand this below. How are we going to really put this all together? So when it comes to the verses themselves, when it comes to Augustus, we're going to have in verse 19. So it's just verse 19. And verse 19 is going to be that. Then you have Obama is going to be verse 20. And let me get this straight. So 20, and then verse 21 is Trump. And then under Trump, you're going to have verse 22 as well. And then it's going to be verse 23 and 24 that are going to address the destruction of Jerusalem. Because it's going to discuss the league. And so we have to figure out how we're going to do that. We put there Titus, but this is the league leading to the destruction of Jerusalem. So 23 and 24. Okay. So let's draw that in. I remember what we had. So we're just going to have verse 19 here.
Now, as a question,
Yeah.
why are you focused on Titus?
Well, because it's going to be the destruction of Jerusalem. That's why I put him there. So obviously, it's going to go all the way through the league up to the destruction of Jerusalem and then the diaspora, right? So
Well,
but yeah, I'm not focused on Titus. I'm just putting them there as a placeholder for
okay,
that.
because
That hit.
Okay, but Titus was Roman emperor from 79 to 81.
I know, but he was the general when Jerusalem was destroyed. So he's
Okay,
not. Yeah. So
all right.
he's going to be the Roman emperor when Pompey is destroyed as a response to the destruction of Jerusalem. So we had Augustus as 19, right? And then Tiberius as, look here again. Oh no, I did that wrong. So we're going to have 19 is actually still part of, so I don't know why I did it that way. Okay. So 19 is part of Julius Caesar still. And this is going to be verse 20. There you go. This is going to be 21. And 22. And then this third angel arriving is going to be 23 and 24. But
it's also kind of interesting with Titus.
Mm-hmm.
Because at birth he had 3 names, and then his name was changed in 69 AD.
Okay. What was his name originally?
Titus Flavius Vespasian
Vespasian.
Arrhenius.
Okay.
Or Anus. And then his name was changed to Titus Caesar Vespasianus.
Okay. Yeah, and Vespasian is the emperor when Jerusalem is destroyed. His dad. So, but yeah, so I mean, we put Titus there just because it's the destruction of Jerusalem that symbolized, but it's going to be all about this league, so this Roman league. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how this is going to line up with what dates below this, but we can agree that this is what's being described. So even though it's going to go back to the Roman League, that is, we can zoom into this third angel arriving here to give that whole history of going. Well, it covers a lot of history, right? That is, those verses 23 and 24, are going to go all the way back to what is it that we had here? Right. So it's going to go back to the Battle of Pharsalus, because the even for a time is the end of that. And so this Battle of Pharsalus and the Battle of Actium are all part of this structure that leads here. It's going to lead all the way to the city of Rome moving from, or the capital of Rome, moving from the city of Rome to Constantinople, right? So it doesn't particularly, when it says even for a time, it's not addressing the destruction of Jerusalem per se, but it's going to talk about that in the verse. So the destruction of Jerusalem and what Rome does ultimately ends to Rome's demise, and it happens progressively. So Rome may, destroy Jerusalem, but its end and its beginning are tied together. So this period for Rome the 360 years that is mentioned here for the fortress, and then also the 360 years leading to the Edict of Milan, leading to the persecution. These become really, really important to understand in the context of what happens with the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, just thinking about this a little bit. We're going to come back to that because some of the keys here, because we have this line drawn out when it comes to even for a time in the context of our history. So that means that this history, which has a structural chiasm to it in our history, there must be something more, is what I'm trying to say. There must be something more about this history of Rome, where we're placing the cross in that whole context. I don't know better how to describe it, but I just think there's something that I'm not seeing. It's like something on the edge of my vision that I haven't. I haven't figured out. So, okay, let me think about this a bit. So, when we look at, it's going to be here. So, when we look at this history, I mean, we have, 31 BC, the Battle of Actium. And now, 31 BC, we're going to have 31 AD for the crucifixion of Christ. Is there any connection then between what we see here with the Battle of Actium and the crucifixion of Christ? Is there, we don't have it here on this line, but it's going to be, 61 years after the Battle of Actium. So any thoughts about that? Like, is there something about this structure that connects to the history of Christ, to the 70th week, to the stoning of Stephen and the destruction of Jerusalem? So we don't have those dates in here, is what I'm trying to say. They're not part of this diagram, but they are part of the verses that give us this diagram. So what we can we do about this? What can we remember? We have the 343 years, right? Now the 343 represents 7 times 7 times 7. What else? So it represents the cross symbolically, but do we need to put the crucifixion of Christ, the stoning of Stephen, and the 70 AD in this diagram? Is there something about this that we're missing? Maybe as we address our history, we'll see this more. But we already know that the 433 days and the 343 days exist as part of our line. The 125,200 days, which is 313 divided by 400, I know it's probably really tiny. Oops, I'm doing the wrong thing here. Okay, so we have the cross represented here. We have the 70 weeks represented here. Should we maybe just analyze this a bit more, is what I'm trying to say, by taking somehow, I'm just going to make this line shorter. Okay, so if we took, I'm taking all of this here, but so somewhere in here we'd have the crucifixion of Christ. So we're going to have, I'm going to change this to AD. And that's going to be, okay, so 427, 31 AD. This is going to be the cross. So you got the cross here. Okay, what else? So we would need the destruction of Jerusalem. Now that's going to be 36 years later. So can we relate the 360 to the 36? So that's going to be temple destroyed. So, I mean, it's probably not proportionally in the right spot. So the crucifixion of Christ, the midst of the week, and the destruction of Jerusalem. So we have 36 years, and we can say that the 36 years relates to the 360, right? So this is a contrast then between Rome and Christ. Any thoughts about it?
Still thinking.
Okay. So, we could put over here the number of years on either side. Now, one thing we could say here is that there is 62 inclusive years. Just, oops, years twice. So that little I there, I can put it in brackets. That means inclusive. So that also connects us to the 70 weeks, right? Just as a symbol, 31 and 31. Like that. Okay, and then we have from 70 AD to the Edict of Milan. So that's going to be what? 253? So 243? What is the number? I'm trying to do two different things at once. Right, so 243 years.
Just with the 62.
Yeah, what's that?
Just with the 62 inclusive years from Actium to the cross.
Yeah. Yes, right.
Um,
So this would be 39 years here. So I got to get the stoning of Stephen in here. So, right? Is that what you're saying? Or you're going to make a comment about the 62 years? So this is going to be
I'm
30.
going to make a comment about the 62.
What's
So you
that?
have, I was going to make a comment about the 62.
Okay.
So you also have Darius being 62 years old, being mentioned in Daniel chapter 5, I think verse 31. And
Yeah.
it goes back 508 years to when he was 62 years old in 539 with the fall of Babylon.
Okay.
And if you go forward from the cross, 508 inclusive years, that will take you to 538 and
Yeah.
the beginning of 60.
Okay.
And in 539, you had the Tickle Tickle Mini Euphorsion, you had the 126 there. So that kind of like mirrors that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can mark from 538, going back 62 years, is 476 with the fall of Rome.
Okay.
Western
So,
Rome.
yeah. So the fall of Rome in 476. How many years was that, you said?
62 years before 538,
Okay.
476.
Okay. So there's things about this 62 that show up as a symbol, um, dealing with Rome and Babylon and modern Babylon. So what is it about 62
Yeah, but
as
something about the fall of Rome, or the fall of Babylon. You
mhm.
can connect it.
Yeah, and we know the 666 years connects Rome and Babylon and of course papal Rome, right? So just wonder what this 62 means as a symbol, if there's something about it itself. Hmm. Okay, that's just me thinking too much. Now it's just, the center date of this structure, is 133 AD. And 133, symbolizes 313. I just don't know I don't know of anything that happens in 133 AD. Or is that right? No, it's not 133. Where's the center? Center of this structure. So we got, never mind. We got, I did my math wrong. So we would take, it's kind of an odd number. So 171.5 is the center. I don't know what that means. You could probably use the actual number of days to get an exact date. Anyway, I don't think there's any real significance in the center date here. I think the center symbolically is the cross that parallels this. Okay, so I know that's me just really starting to get a bit over analytical about it. Okay, so thanks for that, Stephen, with the 62. So when we start looking at this in this history, so this is going to be this history dealing with the League. So obviously, it's mentioning the League because it's going to address the destruction of Jerusalem. That's the ultimate result. But this can be drawn on a line in some way. So now between the League and 157, so or 158, pardon me, plus the destruction of Jerusalem, you're going to get 227 years between the two. If you added, the 161, you'd get 230. So I don't know what we would do with that. How we would draw a line of that. I'd have to look at it in more detail. Okay, so anyway, the line above, we're satisfied with the general idea, right? So we're not drawing a bunch of detail here in this line. So when we look at the line before, and we're going to look at Augustus and Tiberius and Titus, what waymarks would we put on there on the bottom? So we would go back to our analysis of this, which is really incomplete, right? So one of the things we know about this is how we had try to open up this other stuff, how we had analyzed the present truth application. We didn't get very far, right? So we still don't have a solid understanding of this. So let's go back there. So we got these people in here, but we have all kinds of things that we haven't specifically addressed. And we're saying that in this interpretation of this, we're going to have Tiberius. That's going to bring us up to July 18th. And so what are we going to put as our waymark? So we're going to say July 18th is the Tiberius waymark. What about, which is Trump? It happens in the time of Trump. So what about Obama? We know Bush is Julius Caesar. So what is it that we mark in Obama's history? Because we talked about this. What we say, Obama is Augustus. So we have Augustus, this raiser of taxes, right? And we weren't really sure what to do with that. So we have Augustus. Do we have something in the history of Obama that we would mark, right? Or is it wrong, right? So we discussed this back quite a while ago. It's easy to place July 18th in this line, but it's not so easy to place Augustus. Right. So when I go back to this diagram, we can easily say, well, this is going to be July 18th. But how do we fit Augustus in between there? That is, how do we fit Obama? Because if we're making this 11:9, that there's this contrast between Julius Caesar and Christ, and we put it at 11:9, it has to have something to do with this movement. Or do we just leave that as 9/11 and that's Bush the second? It's just another 9/11, and put something else that's in the history of Obama. You understand what I'm saying? That's how we looked at it. So we never decided. Any thoughts about it? Because if Augustus represents Obama, how is Obama represented in this history? Are we mixing lines together? And we had a big discussion too about really understanding Roman law and stuff. So anyway, if we took this and we made this 9/11 again, that's going to still be in the time of Bush. Okay. And we would do what we did before. We talked about with this other line. We had spiritual formation over there, but then we put 11:9, and so we moved the Patriot Act and spiritual formation over just to the empowerment, and we put 11:9/19 there. So, but originally we had them as separate things, and would we put spiritual formation? He shall give him the daughter of women, right? Cleopatra. I don't know. So I'm at a loss to tell us what to do here. So somebody needs to have a suggestion. What should we do? Should that be 9/11 or 11:9? Or both? because I don't know what to do. I mean, is there any way that we can place Augustus as the second angel formalized as something that's connected with our immediate history if Augustus is Obama? Like, how does Obama affect our movement in any way? You know, if we're going to be looking at what we're doing. Now, one of the things that we have that we could address is Obama's inauguration.
Wasn't he Muslim too? Wasn't he?
I would agree with what William is asking, because while Obama claimed to be Christian, he gave more obeisance to the Muslims than he did anyone else.
Yeah, but what would that have to do with anything as far as what we're talking about in these lines?
It would
Well,
have to do with Islam, wouldn't it?
I know, but where's Islam here on the second angel? That's all I'm saying. How would you put that there? Is all I'm trying to say. Just him being Muslim, I don't see how that has relevance unless you have something behind that.
in this kind of a situation, didn't he introduce many laws that became enforceable against Americans, but not against Muslims?
Okay. I don't know. I don't
But
really
didn't he
about
pass that that Hellfly Act, which would bring another tax on us? It would
yeah,
have
well,
brought
that's the
another tax.
raiser of taxes. That's the raiser of taxes. But you know, we're addressing this line. This line has to do with Rome, and Rome generally would symbolize the papacy in this history, and the United States being the armies of Rome. So we have, you know, we have the fall of the Soviet Union marking the first angel's message arriving. We have it as its formalization connected to the Battle of Thermopylae. We have the siege of Jerusalem being 9/11 with the Patriot Act. And then we have to put Julius Caesar in Christ at something. It's either 9/11 or 11/9, 2019. And then, well, if Julius Caesar there is at 9/11, that's fine. We could put Obama in there somehow as a formalization of what's happened. So maybe it would be what happens after 9/11. And maybe Dwight's correct. I just don't know anything about Obama's history, what he passed or anything. But maybe there's a strengthening, and it could be in part a reaction to what happened with 9/11 being an Islamic attack. And then we end up with the president who definitely sympathizes with Islam, having that as part of his background. So if he passed laws that strengthened Islam.
Well, the situation with this Affordable Health Care Act, which is also called Obamacare,
Yeah.
is one where it is more of a tax upon Americans, especially working Americans. But if you are Islamic, you are not being required to adhere to this. And if I'm recalling it correctly, There are those groups, such as many Catholic groups, that are also not being required to have to adhere to this tax.
Okay, so I don't really understand any of that. Like what exactly Obamacare was and how they could have some groups not having to adhere to what specifically. So you have to explain more to me because I don't know anything about it. I know the phrase Obamacare. That's all I know.
Okay. Every state in the United States has what is called an insurance commissioner, who makes the decision as to what insurances are going to be allowed to be sold within their state borders.
Mm-hmm.
If I go 32 miles to my east, the insurances that are available in Idaho are very different from the insurance that's available in Washington.
So each state has their own regulation regarding healthcare and the healthcare insurance.
Correct.
Okay, so it's each state individually.
Obama, through his Affordable Health Care Act, picked up on what Hillary Clinton had wanted to do in the 1990s and what other groups had attempted to do many years before, to have a healthcare system that was going to be national in scope. Obama's healthcare system, as it is, was to be based upon the income of the person or upon the income of the family.
Okay.
Certain portions of this could be set aside depending upon your employment status or your religious beliefs.
Okay, why the religious beliefs thing? I don't understand that. Like, what does that have to do with healthcare?
In some situations, they would come back to say, we don't wish to adhere to every principle of this because this is how we believe. I'd have to go back and give you some details, but I do know that there are several groups that became very adamant about how they did not wish to comply with any of the Obamacare regulations.
Okay. Okay, would that have any effect upon what happened during the pandemic?
I don't know. I'm going to have to look at it.
Okay. Because what I did here is I said, okay, if we're going to have Obama, maybe not his reign being marked, because all of this is going to be in the time of Trump. But we see that represented in our movement are these conflicts that occur. So we got Parminder's movement that's representing, and maybe not necessarily Parminder's movement, but just within the movement, we have this contrast between the character of Christ and the character of Julius Caesar, right? And we would mark that at 11/9/19. And then if we're going to deal with healthcare, and I always mark March 27th, 2020 as the start of this. For me personally, it was the start of the restrictions because of COVID, but it was also the date that the Seventh-day Adventist Church began the 100 Days of Prayer. And that ends up being placed, as this healthcare restrictions. And I just wonder, does Obamacare have any bearing on what happened with those restrictions? Did the fact that and from what I understand, I mean, the states actually had made the decisions independently on what they were going to do regarding the health crisis, the COVID crisis. I don't know what part the federal government in the US had in that regard. But generally, they don't have, at least they didn't. I mean, they shouldn't have anything to do with healthcare, right? That should be the state's authority, right? So does that change with Obamacare? That the federal government gets some authority?
Okay, the major portion of the authority with healthcare, with Obamacare,
Mm-hmm.
is that they're treating healthcare as being something you must basically you must register for. Now, to use an example, if I have a vehicle and I seek to drive my vehicle in any of the 50 states, I have to have insurance on that vehicle.
Okay.
Or I must be insured to drive, so that if I was to cause an accident, there would be a manner in which there could be compensation to any of those that could be injured.
Okay, so in the US, either the vehicle or the person
Correct.
has to be insured. So a person can be insured without the vehicle being insured?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. In Canada, you insure the vehicle, not the person?
Yeah, when we came up for the camp meeting, I carry a specific type of insurance. It's called a broad form, because I use multiple vehicles in my work.
Oh, okay.
Broad form is not accepted in Canada. You have to have a specific vehicle insured.
Yeah, that's how it is in Canada.
Okay. Now, the situation with healthcare, the first attempts with a wide-ranging healthcare system here was called Medicare. And Medicare was offered primarily to those that had reached retirement age. What Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, ACA, was attempting to make more health care available for more people. But under this law, if you did not sign up for health insurance, you would be fined. You would have a financial penalty. Mm-hmm. Now, they started to look at the situation that health insurance was like vehicle insurance. That in order to live in the United States, you had to have this health insurance. Otherwise, you had to pay money.
Yeah, so if you want to live, you have to pay health insurance.
Correct. Now, the problem that I have been having with this, especially under the laws in the state of Washington, as a male, I'd had an insurance agent look over the different health insurance that was available within the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, my rates were dependent upon the cost of health insurance or health care for other women. So even though I was and have always been a male,
Yeah.
my health insurance premium was being based upon the fact that there were women that were likely going to need health care, specifically abortions, and that my rates were dependent upon paying for someone else's abortion.
Okay.
Now, some of the situation to help to pay for this Affordable Health Care Act has meant that there are new taxes that have had to be implemented to help to pay for it. Specifically, taxes on medical devices or pharmaceutical sales. Taxes had also been increased for people with higher incomes. So the wealthy were being required to subsidize insurance for those that were not wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So the other part of this is that many businesses were being told that you would have to automatically register your employees that receive certain hours or certain numbers of hours for the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
So the businesses began to say, okay, we're just not going to offer this as many hours to these employees, period.
So shouldn't they have called it the Unaffordable Care Act?
Well,
yeah,
I would agree, but the point is they want to put it in what they see as being the best possible light.
Well, I know in America you guys pay way more for healthcare than we do in Canada, like astronomically more.
Sure.
And in Canada, it's just part of the taxes. Part of your taxes go to, like it's provincial, right? So provincial taxes go to, there'd be sales tax and things like that, and some income tax. They would go to just to the healthcare system, and then everybody's got healthcare. You know, it's not very expensive. Like, you know, a poor person doesn't really pay much. Most of our taxes in Alberta, of course, come or because we don't have a sales tax in Alberta. We just have the federal sales tax, and it just comes from oil revenue. So there isn't really many people who pay Alberta tax at all, other than, you know, the tax you get on your gasoline, and then the oil companies, what they pay. So anyway, I guess all of that information regarding Obama, that's really where he's going to be this raiser of taxes, is about what happens with Obamacare.
Right.
Now the question is, does what he does, bringing the federal government into healthcare, because before that, it's really a state issue, right? That was part of the problems that people had with it.
Well, the states were regulating what could be sold, what couldn't be sold. At one point in the state of Washington, an individual could obtain health insurance for say between $100 to $150 a month, depending on what they needed. There were certain situations that could change that. What the Affordable Care Act was supposed to do was to help eliminate issues for people with pre-existing conditions, to give them greater access to the healthcare markets. What's happened is the burden for some of these that may have cancer, that may have other pre-existing conditions, has been spread over a wider group.
Okay. Well, one of the things here that I'm reading is it says that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that created a rapid growth and expansion of enrollment in Obamacare.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand this graph here. So yeah, so people enrolled for Obamacare because of the pandemic. Rapid. So maybe that's something that it has to do with. Yeah. So, I mean, some people are saying, it was the Affordable Care Act actually helped people during the pandemic. Just looking at these headlines. Okay.
But I thought at one time that the Supreme Court had ruled it unconstitutional. I didn't know we had it back into force.
The Supreme Court did strike down elements of what is called the Affordable Care Act, but they did not strike down the whole thing.
So what kind of was it about choices people had or something?
Primarily, it was the penalties that were done away with.
Okay. Okay, so penalties. So anyway, just looking at the line we have in front of us. So I'm just marking March 27th, 2020 as the pandemic itself. And that would be where Obama's tax comes into play during the pandemic, but I don't know enough about it. It is a health issue, but I don't know if we could just place that there. Right. So this is one option. We could do this type of thing here, or we could just, go from 9/11 to Obama to these histories. So we can have Bush, Obama, Tiberius, and Titus. So I could get rid of all this. I'm just gonna, oops. Let's put this down here for now. So if we put 9/11 up here, so you're going to have the Patriot Act, and now we're marking Pompey there at 9/11, and then we're going to mark here. We'll just put simply Bush II. Right, and then we would put something about Obama. Now, we had looked at this before, that there was a period of time between, so with Obama, we have his inauguration. So this is going to be, well, we'll put it 1/20. What year is it? The 20, and what year is Obama's?
From 2008 to 2016.
Yeah, so his inauguration's in 2009. Okay. Now we had something addressing that as far as a symbol in our history. And that was let me see here. Okay. Okay, so there's 2,688 days from 9/11 to Obama's inauguration on January 20th, 2009. So and that number is related to the tax, right?
Right.
The additional extension, an application for an additional extension of time to file your taxes. So that would make sense to put that there, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we got Obama, his inauguration, that 2,688 days. That's interesting. Okay. Now then we have Trump. So, what to mark in Trump's history? I mean, obviously we could put, the election when he becomes president, November 9th, 2016. But normally we're going to look at in Tiberius, it's going to be, about the crucifixion. So normally I would just put July 18, 2020 there. But okay, that makes sense, what I'm saying?
I see it.
Okay, so and the question is, this second angel's message, what is it? So we have the first angel's message. So in our history, that was about, like, the line above is about Rome. Right now we're looking at our history. We're paralleling Rome. And or at least this history is paralleling Rome in some way. So this is Rome in the sense of the papacy conquering the United States. Now, when it comes to Bush the second and Obama, we can clearly see that sort of thing happening, right? Even though Obama's not a Catholic or anything like that, there still is a connection between his actions and what the Catholic Church is seeking to do to bring in a Sunday law, right? So things are put into place, and so Obama in these control. What's that?
It says, didn't the Pope visit the Capitol under? Or was it under Obama or under Trump? The first time he visited, the Pope came to the Capitol.
Okay, so what you're talking about is it's going to be under Obama, or not, where the Pope is going to what does he do at that time? He goes to the White House.
That was in 2015 under Obama.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember it was in 2015. and it's going to be the Pope we have now, Pope Francis. So what does he do? So
kind of interesting that it was on September 22nd, 2015 as well.
Yeah.
Ah, ah.
And September 22nd, the significance is?
Just a moment.
I know we had something to do with September 22nd in one of our lines, but I can't remember.
Right. Well, as I'm looking at this, in our line, in the Gregorian sense, this would only be the 8th day of the 6th month. But according to the rabbinic calendar, we would be on the 9th day of the 7th month.
Okay, so let me see what you're talking about. Yes, it's the 8th day of the 6th month. On the Julian, it's the 9th day of the 9th month, 22nd day of the 9th month. Anyway, it's interesting. I know there was something else about September 22nd, which I can't remember. I know we're moving pretty slow here today, but okay. Anyway, I don't remember. I know there was some line or something that we had that had that date, but I can't remember what it was. Okay, so we got Obama. We got this 2,688 days. So that tax form number is appropriate for Obama being the one who is responsible for the taxes. So I think that this line makes more sense to do it in this way rather than to put it the more detail into our history. So so then we're going to have Trump. So we got Bush the second, we have Obama, we have Trump, and then we have to figure out what date is significant in relationship to Tiberius. Now here it's going to talk about Tiberius. It's not going to talk about the crucifixion, as the main idea, right? So when it gets to Tiberius, we're going to have right. So in verse 21, it's going to be at how he obtains the kingdom by flatteries. And then it has, with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him and shall be broken. Yea, also the prince of the covenant. So it's going to refer to the cross under Trump, right? So with So what we would have to figure out is what is important here. Is it about Trump obtaining the kingdom? Or is that the date we're going to mark? So that would be like November 9th, 2016. Right. So if we did that,
but if we were marking November 9th, 2016, that's still under Obama.
Yeah, but we're just marking when he wins the election.
Well,
so he obtains the kingdom by flatteries. It's about him obtaining the kingdom. So I understand what you're saying in the really technical sense. Until the inauguration, he's not the president. But this is not about him being the president. It's about him obtaining the kingdom by flatteries. And that would be the winning of the election.
Okay, now I'm not here to argue.
Yeah.
But can't we say that Biden also obtained the kingdom by flatteries?
Well, maybe, but Biden's not part of this line here. Right? That verse is addressing Trump. So Trump does this. So he's the one there. So we're going to have to think about this a little bit more. I'm just putting this here as, what is it that we're going to mark as the second angel being empowered? And to fully understand this line, how we're applying what's above to what's happened in our history. Okay. Okay, well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for your goodness and love and for the study that we have had here this morning. We just ask for your continued help as we try to understand these things. Be with each person. May your angels watch over us and our loved ones. And we entrust everyone to your care. Help us to do the things that we can to influence others for good. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.